Hello and a warm collisions. Why do I say welcome to my guest today, Mr. Cordell Jacks. How you doing, Cordell?
Great, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely pleasure to have you on, man. A mutual introduction, as is so many guests I meet on the show. A mutual friend, I understand, a long-term friends of yours, and a short-term, but a very good friend of mine, Mr. Iggy Domagowski, introduced us. It's like, hey, you two guys should talk. So when Iggy makes an intro, you kind of take it a little bit seriously, or I certainly do. It sounds like you do as well.
Yeah, Iggy and I have been friends for 20 years, and he's a wise man in many ways.
Yes, he is. And we're going to stop because I'm going to hope he's going to listen to this. So we're not going to let it go to his head. So we're not going to talk about him too much. You are CEO, GP at Regenerative Capital Group. Let us into the tent. What's a Regenerative Capital Group? What are you guys all about?
Well, it's funny that we mentioned Iggy right off the bat because the genesis of Regenerative Capital Group goes back almost 20 years. Iggy and I were colleagues in business school at the University of Manitoba, and at that time we had a real brain drain happening, all of our top students leaving for Toronto or elsewhere. And so one of the headquarters of Canada's largest financial services institution at the time was based in Winnipeg, and a gentleman there put together an executive management development program to keep folks in Manitoba. And Iggy and I were among the first of those who were accepted into that program. And why I share this is because as our friend Iggy went off and continued to work with this gentleman through his career, buying small, medium enterprises and growing them, I went off and spent a career in international development, impact finance, circular economies, ocean plastics, and all sorts of different innovations and impact. And about 3 years ago, our friend Iggy and Mike, they sold their company. Mike had been my business partner, Mike Miller. He had been giving away some money in philanthropy. He's a very generous individual, but was not very happy with the impact his philanthropy was having. And like many, they don't just want to give away their capital. They want to use their wisdom and experience. And so Iggy actually suggested that Mike and I have a conversation. We now live together near each other on Vancouver Island. We've worked together
you live
before.
together. You guys took this very seriously.
We're taking it. We're going deep here. But Mike came to me and said, "Look, I'm looking for someone to help create an impact thesis for me. Really, the design principles are around entrepreneurship. It's what I know. It's what has made me who I am. It gives autonomy and agency to others. That's where I'd like to support the Canadian ecosystem. And how can we be in conversation?" And so after a bit of a discovery and research phase, I said, what Iggy have been doing these last 20 years of buying small, medium enterprises and growing them to some pretty fantastic companies and cultures, there's a whole brand and name and investment vehicle around this in the US, and they've been doing this for 35 years. It was started at Harvard, popularized at Stanford, and grew to all the Ivy League business schools and now many business schools of teaching entrepreneurship through acquisition, an alternative entrepreneurial career path, not in starting up something new and taking the risks of 70 to 80% failure rates, but in ultimately looking at the macro economy, which is mostly made of small, medium enterprises, buying those businesses as they seek ownership succession, and then growing them forward. And so I said, look, I love this model. It's what you know. And I believe that this asset class hasn't been used to its highest potential in terms of, generating impact in our economy, not just bottom line capitalism and private equitizing our Main Street economy. And so I'd like to build you a fund. I'd like to build with you a fund here. And that became the start of what is now Regenerative Capital Group, which is a model that we've designed to invest in cohorts of acquisition entrepreneurs. We fund them to go out and meet with business owners looking for ownership succession, meet with brokers who are selling these businesses. We fund these businesses, the acquisition, the buyout of these businesses, and then we vest equity to these entrepreneurs and their teams as they grow the value creation strategies of these companies to include wider nested system issues, environmental and social health and well-being that can be core to their value creation strategies. And that's what we have now is Regenerative Capital Group.
That was an excellent and very comprehensive explanation. You built in the origin story. You touched on the why. As a marketer, that was very, very impactful from a storytelling perspective. The overarching landscape, it also feels like no better time than now. That's an overgeneralized statement, but you can't listen or read anything that talks about the level of transference of businesses that's about to happen, and a lot of businesses struggling to find out what that model looks like. Also, young entrepreneurs, like everything, it's harder to buy a house. It's more expensive to get it to buy a business. There's so many things that hold back younger entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs to actually get started. It sounds like a kind of a perfect, no better idea than a time who's come kind of mindset, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's the big, huge opportunity here. One, as you said it, this is the silver tsunami decade. The silver tsunami meaning silver hair, gray hairs of the baby boomer generation, who, as we know, were the largest population, the largest generation in the history of mankind. As these baby boomer owners who run and have founded many of these businesses look for retirement, in Canada right now, 91% of them do not have a succession plan. And so one, that's a big crisis problem if we don't know how to transition our Main Street economy well. But two, it's really the big opportunity. I think we all know we're facing some interesting challenges. May we be born into interesting times here. We've got climate issues, we've got biosphere issues, we've got widespread mental health issues, we've got circular economy, ocean plastics, waste, like all of these confounding challenges that face our generation and our children's generation here. And so for us, we looked at levers of change, and really the biggest part of our economy, the biggest part of our GDP is small medium enterprises. These small medium enterprises are an inflection point. They're all going into new chapters regardless of who buys these companies or whether they shutter. And so it's a perfect inflection point to use this silver tsunami as an opportunity to evolve what truly value creation looks like, what regenerative value creation looks like, not just sustainability and doing less harm or trying to get to net zero and put back what we take or restore things from a bygone age, but really how does net positive value creation, how does relationality and treatment of others and the way we look to flourishing, thriving, healthy communities, environments, and societies look like? This is the lever we wanted to play with in our economy.
I love your passion, and a venture like this is not without its effort and energy required. So having passion for it is what pushes you through that work and that opportunity. Let's give it a little bit, so like small to medium size. Let's start defining a little bit of kind of like what are the type of businesses you're looking at? Like where are they in terms of where they sit in the ecosphere in terms of size, scope? Do you measure it by EBITDA? Do you measure it by revenue? Like what's your filter that just at the start of that? And then we'll get into the entrepreneur piece, which I'm also really curious about, of who these individuals are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so much like traditional search funds, we look at companies that are 500,000 to 5 million EBITDA. Okay. And so why that number? Because anything less than 500,000 is you're usually buying a job rather than a business and platform that you can grow. Anything more than that, you're starting to reach into the field of strategics and private equity with much higher multiples, much bigger capital needed, although we are seeing private equity starting to reach down into this asset class. And so these companies, we're pretty sector agnostic, although our GP experience, we do have a wide swath in manufacturing, distribution, in B2C, B2B, a number of different areas. Ultimately, the types of businesses that we acquire, we leave up to the entrepreneurs that we're investing in. We invest, and maybe I'm jumping to your second question here, but really, first and foremost, we are investing in individuals. We are investing in high performance, high ambition, purpose-driven entrepreneurs who we like and we want to play with, and we really believe are, regardless of the type of companies they search for and acquire, and regardless of size, they're the type of people that can overcome any obstacles, that will grow this, that we're willing to, look to evolve value creation strategies with.
Getting back to even just the businesses, 500 to 500K, that makes a lot of sense. And you talked about PE reaching down, but we'll put that one in the parking lot. We'll talk about that later. Because I've heard that comment from a few friends in kind of more earlier seed round or kind of venture stage where you're seeing some of that. But talking about the potential, you talk about just how much diversity and how many different types of business, B2B, B2C and that. But when you think about the ability from the regenerative perspective to have impact, how much is that a criteria of you being able to look at that business and say, wow, I think not only can I start from a good foundation, I think we can really do so much from an optimization and a bigger impact. Like that's got to be a huge part of the filter that you guys put across this.
Yeah, it truly is. I mean, definitively, we look at the businesses that our CEOs and residents, as we call them, bring to our investment committee. And first and foremost, is this a business that has the potential to grow, that has the potential to be a real lever of systemic change in the industries that we're going to be playing in? And so that's first and foremost. Are we getting a good business here? And we know how to do that from again our 20 years of GP experience. The other
And
aspect of this,
I'm going to jump in again.
yeah,
Dude, I'm so curious. I have so many questions. So you've got a business that's been running kind of that 1 to 1.5, 1.7, been sitting in that EBITDA range for years. When you look at it and go, wow, I think we can take this to 5, or wow, I think we can take it to 10 and actually exit it to PE down the road. Is it that type of a mindset, or are you looking for, hey, I think we can do a 15 to 20% growth every year? Like, how do you even facilitate the thinking around what is growth and what is potential for upside?
yeah. So we run our fund as a very similar to traditional search funds, meaning that when the types of cap table that we use to acquire these businesses, we're usually going to incumbent banks that are already working with these businesses. They're great businesses, and so these banks are looking to capitalize the purchase usually around 50%. We use very similarly a 25% vendor take back or seller's note in this acquisition. So we're leveraging ourselves up with the 1/4 of equity that we put into the business.
Which makes sense. I've heard that kind of formula
Yeah,
many times being used that way.
very common. What that means is that we are looking for businesses that we can grow 10 to 15% per year. And so with that, our ambition is high, not only in that growth rate, but the way we've structured ourselves as more of a semi-permanent capital vehicle. We're not looking to, as many traditional searchers look for businesses, to buy a business, technologize that business, grow the business for 6 or 7 years, and then flip it for a higher multiple at private equity. Totally. The values-aligned investors that are coming around our fund are looking for us to, yes, grow these businesses, yes, willing to play a longer-term hold from a regenerative impact value creation strategy, but ultimately also recognize that unfortunately the history of search funds have been private equitization of Main Street economy, and that has been generally degenerative for the social fabric of our communities and ultimately for the environment. And so it's a different play on this, but it's not a degrowth or a slow growth movement. Core to the types of companies that we're looking for are businesses that we can take, which are proven good business models, usually been around for a good number of years, steady growth. And ultimately, are these the types of businesses that we as a fund and as an ecosystem can support these entrepreneurs to take more than a bottom line capital approach to business? Most of these businesses have been mom and pop businesses that have, successfully grown looking at bottom line. Some have done, philanthropy, but most haven't taken a true impact lens, a wider lens on what value creation looks like when you engage wider stakeholder ecosystems. And the history of impact investing has proven that's not at the cost of market rate returns. That's at the ability to grow abundance from a multi-capital perspective. You're
plussing it. You're plussing up. You're not minusing to make one to take the other away. Right?
No, it's the nice benefit of doing the right thing here is that it's very profitable, and that's the goal here. Like healthy,
I do love when
wealthy.
those things merge together. But I'm also hearing a much more of a bit of a patient capital approach. You're not just trying to play where you're differentiating from maybe where the model has typically played. To get that impact, you've got to look at a longer game, a longer horizon.
Yeah, if we take 6-year time frames for flipping businesses, we will make the shortest term cash flow decisions. And again, that's generally degenerative.
How many businesses do you have in the fund right now?
We are just closing on our first. We have 3 businesses in due diligence currently for our first cohort. So our cohort started with us at the beginning of this year in February of 2024. So they're all about 10 months into their search. Usually traditional search funds, you budget for about 18 to 24 months of search period before you lock in the business. So they're all right on schedule, and we're going to be very excited to announce our first acquisitions in Q1 of 2025.
Oh, so we're actually talking at the perfect time, is what I'm also hearing right there.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's spin back to the cohort of the entrepreneur cohort and who you're working with. And first of all, this is North American wide, correct, or is it just Canada?
Just Canada.
Okay, so Canada only. And obviously that was strategic play just based on competitive set and looking at market opportunity?
Well, so the history of search funds, Stanford does a biannual review, and they just did one here in 2024. The history and growth of search funds has mainly been in the US, and just in this last couple of years has spilled out across the borders. But as we were talking about offline beforehand, search funds are starting to be well known in Canada. And so there's a large market here. It's not 35 years aged and competitive as it is with all the business students, Ivy League MBAs coming out, and just a very well-known asset class. And so we see that as a real opportunity as a fund here. And as my business partner likes to say, Be careful when you start something like this. Canada is a big enough environment. 900,000 SMEs changing hands, 91% without succession plan. That's a big enough sandbox. I'll show you the graveyard of companies who thought they could just enter the U.S. as an addendum, and so that's
Yes,
good for us for now.
Those are some impressive numbers, and kind of go where the competition isn't, right? To oversimplify that statement.
Exactly, exactly.
Was there any reasons in your mind, maybe just from the perspective of why it's been so slow to kind of take hold here?
It's a really good question. Why are we often behind?
You can apply this to a lot of different categories, Cordell.
When Mike and I originally were looking at an impact thesis here, part of this was, maybe we'll give a gift to a business school and start a national search fund center, a national entrepreneurship through acquisition center at one of the universities. And so I literally did a cross Canada tour, met with the deans of the business schools, showed them the Stanford search reports and said, guys, what do we know about this and what are we doing? And none of them had heard of it. 35 years,
Okay.
all these Ivy League business schools, and aside from McGill, who had one credit course in their MBA program, luckily that was 2.5 years ago, and since then I think we scattered some seeds. You're seeing ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition programs launching at BCom and MBA levels across Canada. So there's a question always of why are we so far behind? Don't know. We've got our own issues to address, but it's the same thing in impact investing. We're often behind our US and UK counterparts, but I like to think that we're creating our own special sauce here in Canada.
Well, the nice thing about that, you can go peek at the playbook, right? And go, I like page 6. I don't like page 2. I'll take page 5 and 9 and kind of pull it back. So I think that's okay, right?
Yeah, and that goes to your earlier question about the cohorts. We kind of scanned the global market of different search fund models, and we really like the accelerator model. One, because searching for a business, it's a lonely journey. It's got its highs and lows. You're reaching out to business owners, you're doing proprietary deal sourcing, you're dealing with brokers, and you're getting rejection 99% of the time. On average, the studies have shown that you got to do 3,000 to 4,000 outreaches to find a business that you ultimately close in within that 18 to 24 months. And so doing that alone,
that's a real number. That's just to put the weight of what it takes if that's the top of the funnel, right?
you're dialing for businesses. And part of this is really forging these entrepreneurs through the search process of learning about businesses, managing due diligence, managing an ecosystem of service providers, lawyers, quality of earnings accountants, insurance, all of these different things, it's really a baptism by fire in terms of getting them ready to take on those CEO roles. And so anyways, we found that the accelerator model was, we thought, best for a first cohort. We'll do this again because they learn faster together. They're sharing knowledge, they're sharing deal flow, and it's just been wonderful to see these incredible people go from not knowing a ton about search in February of this year to being brilliant at it by the end of this year.
How many individuals in your cohort?
We have 5 individuals.
5. And how many did you start with to get to 5? Just keeping the theme of the funnel in place.
Yeah, so we did a quick call for applications last summer, and we had 170 applicants for these 5 positions, which we were very happy with. I should say, part of our goal was not to recreate the wheel here in Canada. Unfortunately, the history of search funds in the US has been 90% white, male, Ivy League educated, management consulting, investment banking, private equity backgrounded folks, which is, a quite exclusive asset class and entrepreneurial play if you look at it.
That is an exclusive club for sure.
And so we know from, our history of experience, I think most people know, it doesn't take any of those pedigrees to be a great entrepreneur, let alone a great entrepreneur with a already proven and successful platform to run. And so part of our goal was to really diversify the types of individuals who we want to give to this opportunity, we want to buy companies for, we believe are the types of people that will, again, see these things through to excellence. And so it was upon us to really extend outreach in that first call of applications to get a wide application cohort. As we look to cohort 2 that we're going to make a call for as soon as 2025, usually it looks like Q3 of 2025. Similarly, we'll extend that outreach to say, a regenerative future and economy is ultimately a widely distributed wealth economy. And so how do we give those that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to do so?
Parking a lot of those pedigree type indicators or business cards that you explained. What are some of the factors that you looked at, and like kind of some of them that are very measurable, but some of them that were just a personal that you and Mike and sat around and said, you know what, we're going to look for these types of individuals with these types of values or socioeconomic backgrounds, or what were some of the factors just that was maybe on the quant qual list when we play around with those two things?
Yeah. So we're looking for a lot of the traditional factors of someone you'd invest in, character, grit, beginner's mindset, learner's mindset, someone that is willing to be on a rocket ship journey of just learning. It does not stop in this. And so we can look at all the traditional entrepreneurial skill sets, but more so than anything, there were two factors. One, we had to ensure that we wanted to play with these individuals. We're taking a long-term career possibly move together, and so we want to ensure
you're entering in a lot. You're moving in together. Almost your joke from earlier. Yeah,
exactly. We're moving in together, and so we want to make sure these are people we like to play with. We're going to have fun with, like truly want to build a better world with. And I would say, secondly, and more importantly, these are individuals who are going on a very big journey, not just from a search perspective, but from a regenerative perspective. So regeneration, I just want to take a second to describe this word because it's kind of a new word in the lexicon of most individuals. And we're starting to hear it in impact communities. And, is this a fad? Is this the next corporate social responsibility, CSR, environmental social governance, ESG, 17 sustainable development goals, 80 metrics that matter, B Corp, impact. What is this next piece? And regeneration is really about aligning our economy at the highest principles, aligning our economy with our ecology. If we don't figure out how to do that, infinite growth in a finite resource planet doesn't work, and all indicators tell us we're heading for some trouble if we don't figure out a better way to drive our economy to wider value creation that is more net positive. And so no one has the answer. Anyone out there that you hear that says, oh, this is the way to do it, wrong, because there is no right way to do that. This is about going on a journey of learning what it means to take everything that literally the business owners and our foremothers and forefathers have brought forward to us in this economy and evolve it to a way that means a continued, thriving future for our people, our planet going forward. And that means these entrepreneurs have had to come into a process where there's not a private equity playbook that you just administer pull these levers, decrease costs, increase these revenue. This is really about unlearning. And most of us with business backgrounds have a lot to unlearn from a very industrial mechanistic mindset.
Which arguably is way harder than the learning was in the first place.
Exactly. So unlearning some of that and then really learning about regenerative principles, about life-centric principles that they can put at the heart of their value creation strategies. And so those that were willing to truly go on a big personal development journey with us in this were those that were the fortunate few that got to be part of our first five.
I really appreciate how clear that was. Thinking about, I'm now about to acquire, you're about to make some announcements. You're about to acquire these new businesses. I am swamped with just learning this business. How much time? I'm just thinking about carving out the fact you're doing these things, like that in itself is a big undertaking, just to be really respectful of what they're about to walk into. It could be a 20-year business that's been family run. It could be so many factors. It's a new role. And oh, by the way, it's your business at the same time. And then you've got to go on this regenerative journey. How do you, again, you're thinking about this cohort as a long-term relationship. How do you balance that out to make sure that they just don't get sucked into the business, to be blunt?
Yeah, it's a big part of the value proposition that we offer at the fund and with our wider ecosystem. We have a lovely investment committee who are there resourcing them, giving them their years of wisdom and experience. Iggy is one of those folks on that investment committee.
He mentioned to me that he was involved and he was quite excited about it.
Yeah, we have folks that are on our impact advisory committee, people who are leading the Canadian Purpose Economy Project, who have led the largest foundations in Canada, who have led the largest organizations to become biomimicry successful and hugely profitable on a global scale. We have a whole ecosystem of partners who see the opportunity that is being offered in this Silver Tsunami Search Fund regenerative time, that it's our job to keep them above the line attitude-wise, to keep them in a state of possibility, and to resource them.
Give them access. So knowing who to call when you need to have that question. Talk to me. Well, you're kind of in the middle to a certain extent in a lot of ways. Talk to me about the investment side of this. Is there what's the interest like for this type of opportunity specifically and are your investors majority Canadian based or are they more spread out?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So we put together our first fund is a $25 million targeted close fund.
Okay.
We've raised 17.5 million of that already. We have a big GP commitment from our side to start this fund off and to prove this model. We're
Okay.
very happy to announce, by the time this airs, we will have officially announced it, but I'm happy to announce that the Social Finance Fund of Canada, of the Government of Canada, through one of their three wholesalers, has made a $5 million investment into us. They see the potential of this play, and they've been very supportive to help us look at how we grow this across
Congrats on
Canada.
that.
Thank you. And
Those
then
are very validating for other people that are waiting and seeing and watching to see what happens, right? Those are really key moments in the journey.
exactly, exactly. And then the rest are family offices. Those who are, many of those
Mm-hmm.
individuals are past entrepreneurs themselves. They get the model. They want to use not just their capital to support something, but they want to be advisors to these entrepreneurs who they think they have quite a bit to offer to. So it's a
Well,
great ecosystem.
thinking about legacy and being able to pass on, like you said, those who've come before us, who's stepped on, someone has stepped on the landmine you're about to step on, but it's so great if they can just tell you to step over a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. In
Exactly.
business, that's hugely exponentially valuable as you run at a great pace and don't necessarily look always where you're stepping.
Exactly. Exactly. No,
I'm assuming from Mike's perspective, other individuals in a similar place than him, like he to a certain degree started off by trying to solve his own frustration, which is the true entrepreneur right there, right?
Mike's frustration leaving. He was an executive at three publicly listed financial services companies in Canada, and had been incredibly successful. But his entrepreneurial drive broke through because dealing with boards and dealing with big institutions. Ultimately, what him and Iggy did with Tundra and many other companies, impressive. And that ethos speaks to the types of folks that just want to get out there and get shit done.
Yes, that oftentimes in the over bureaucratic environments, those two run very contrary to each other. When you see search funds coming into Canada, and to be transparent, I had a chat with a few friends that are in that cycle where they're buying businesses and on a smaller scale, kind of a little bit more that probably 800 to 1.5 billion EBITDA range. And I made the comment, I said, I'm chatting with a gentleman about search funds. He goes, yeah, really interesting to listen. But those damn search funds are driving up the prices of things I'm having to pay. I'm like, oh, well, that's a different perspective. And not to be negative, I just wanted to open it up. When you think about the positive impacts this could have on our environment, which to me become instantly clear, even at a very simple scale, any negatives or any is it just, I don't want to use the word negative, but where do you see all the variety of impacts that could happen, and how do you kind of manage that as you think about this, driving this forward in the Canadian market?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, although we're on the buying side of things right now, I think it's great for baby boomer generation owners who have put their blood, sweat, and tears. Parents like mine who have built their companies, and rather than just being taken by bottom feeders for the lowest price they can get, have an actual informed marketplace and a good buyer. That's going to be good for our economy one way or another, even though it might drive our prices up. So I think that's all right. I would say that the big missing piece. I go down to the Harvard Business School ETA conference. I've been through the US to the networks. I think the biggest missing piece in this is how can we take this economy and evolve it to more than just business as usual. And that conversation is starting to be had in the US. 35 years later, you're seeing funds like New Majority Capital who are buying for overlooked entrepreneurs and giving them majority interest. You're starting to see ESOP, employee share ownership models, and employee ownership trust models. You're starting to see variations on this, and I'd like to see that much wider because, again, if we don't figure out more than business as usual, I think most of these businesses are going to have a harder future.
Now, what I'm hearing you say, which means inclusivity, means different perspectives, means like marginalized groups that wouldn't traditionally get access to what is behind the curtain, right? Oftentimes, right?
Marginalized group and wider wealth distribution is a part of this, but we can widely distribute what is essentially a degenerative economy, and it doesn't matter who owns what. Of course, we don't want to see 1%ing, and we do want to see wider inclusion, but ultimately we also have to figure out how to regenerate these businesses, how to evolve value creation, and that's critical to what we're trying to do here.
I appreciate that. 91% don't have a succession plan. Any statistics on which are actually viable viable businesses. Like there's some businesses in there that maybe should just get shut down, and that's fine. When you start looking at breaking apart that number, you seem like a guy who's broken that number out beyond the 91%. I'm going to venture to guess. Can you give us a little more perspective around that? Because it's a big number that kind of hits you, and I love a good, powerful number to draw attention. But if you start unpacking that, what's the real opportunity inside that 91% from your point of view?
One man's treasure is another man's trash. Something like that. Honestly, it depends.
Yep. Well said. Good answer.
Yeah, it depends on your lens. Our lens is we have limited capital, so we're not going to take any high capex businesses, and that's just part of Regenerative Capital Group's lenses. We're not looking for turnarounds. We're not looking for rocket ship growth companies. We just can't pay the multiples that strategics can and in pure cash in that. And so our lens gets refined, and then it really comes down to our entrepreneurs. What's their lens? The interesting thing about this, and it is somewhat correlated to the history of search funds, is that most searchers come in with an impact and an investment thesis. I'm going to focus my 4,000 outreaches towards these 2 or 3 sectors of which I have business experience in. And the interesting thing is, fully a third, and in our experience much more, don't end up buying businesses in the sectors they sought out to. They end up refining their thesis. They end up having interesting models drop on their lap from business brokers, from referrals, from lawyers, from anyone in their community. And they end up going, wow, this is an incredible business. I see myself running something like this. And so although we have this window that we're continuously refining and getting smarter at, ultimately there is a bit of serendipity of the right business at the right time for the right people.
Which tends why that top of the funnel is so broad, because you never know necessarily where's going to be that fit. And I love what you said, and I love some of the soft side of what you're talking about. We have to want to do business with these people. We're going to get into relationships. Do we like them? Can we have fun working together? That doesn't always end up being a predefined business model, right?
It's so important from day one. This is about stewarding legacy. And so you want to take over from a business owner that mostly wants to ensure that all of their relations, all of their social capital that they've built through this organization isn't going to be squeezed, jobs cut, moved across the country. And so from the get-go, a big part of this is a narrative of like, yes, most people in the end will take the highest multiple they can possibly get. But all things being equal, if we're offering a similar multiple on these businesses, we're winning those deals, or at least into due diligence, because we have a better stewardship legacy model in what we're trying to do here. And so a lot of this is just relational. And then ultimately, when it comes down to defining what the impact potential of one of these acquisitions look like, we don't take a very top-down, traditional, prescriptive approach to, this business, clearly there's a decarbonization strategy, or clearly there's a circular economy strategy.
Okay.
More of that mindset, which I've been an impact investor for a long time. That's all been good, but it is still colonial, prescriptive, and a power play. When stakeholder ecosystems co-determine what business opportunities there are by addressing some of these wider nested issues, and again, our biggest problems are our biggest market opportunities here. When they decide that, then you've got ownership. Then you've got the magic that happens behind renewed essence of people, renewed essence of place of the business, and a renewed purpose for the business that, again, ultimately ends up becoming more profitable and better for everyone.
I really appreciate it. Colonial, prescriptive, and power play. I could just unpack that for the next 10 minutes, but that was such a powerful statement. Not taking into consideration that these are humans doing business with humans, and that personal side of it can make a huge difference. I was talking to a friend the other day, and they ended up buying a rural property, one of my neighbors actually. And someone else had offered higher, but they connected with the seller wanted someone who was going to take care of it. And they had horses, and all of a sudden they got this at a discounted rate over above what another buyer was willing to pay, because they actually cared about who bought the thing. And it was refreshing to know that still is, we're still humans having an experience, right? And not to underestimate that for the sake of a spreadsheet and a business model. So
much of this comes down to being in right relationship here. And so like from the highest level, this is actually a very reconciliatory act. I know we talk about that in Canada in terms of our Indigenous peoples and in terms of the harms that have been caused and the righting of some of those wrongs. But really, at the highest level, this is about being in right relationship with your stakeholders, in right relationship with planet Earth and the material areas of impact we have, in right relationship with your community and in right relationship with the funders that you're partnering with. So, the magic isn't in some technology or some new way of driving the economy that is completely unimagined. It's getting back to basic principles of we like to play with people we like to play with, and we like to play with people that we treat with respect and integrity and want to ideate with. And so that's putting a lot of that heart back into the core of the business.
And working with models that have been tested and proven and have a track record, and that could be, built upon. I love the net new rhetoric that gets a lot of good media, but it's not very realistic sometimes. I heard you say that, like, let's focus on tried and true principles, but let's bring in some of that humanity that sometimes can get lost in the sake of deal making.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
To pivot back to deal making, what's your timeline on the fund? How do search funds work in terms of like, we're going to take the money, we're going to invest, we're going to have this wrapped up in the next 10 years. How does that structure out? Maybe different than a traditional kind of venture fund.
Yeah, so we raised this cap table, this $25 million first fund. We expect to deploy that by end of Q2 2025, because that's the end of the 18-month funded search period for these entrepreneurs. So our model quickly raises capital, quickly deploys it, unlike many venture capital funds.
Yeah, that 3 to 4 years. That's a pretty quick cycle. Yeah, you guys are getting after it.
Yeah, so depending on the size of businesses, we talked about multiples of EBITDA, but what does that mean in terms of revenue? This could be anywhere from $70 to $90 million in businesses that we end up acquiring. Again, using that capital structure of debt and leveraging that. So that's what Fund 1 looks like. And we're going to close this fund, as soon as we reach our target, but likely in April of 2025. For investors coming in, we put a 7-year lockup on their capital, which isn't outrageous at all. And why that is because during those first 5 years, we're paying off the debt on the business. We're paying off the seller's note on the business, and we recapitalize our LP investors so that they're made whole by end of year 6. After that, they've got a lottery ticket in terms of the portfolio of businesses that they own and the growth thereafter. We give annual liquidity based on NAV, based on net asset valuation of the portfolio year on year, with right of first refusal to our current LPs. And that's really the model. But it is an indefinite model after that. It's not evergreen in that we do have a limited time frame from when investors can join our fund, but it's a little bit of a hybrid model. And again, as my business partner likes to say, it often takes 10 or 12 years to take one of these size companies to 100 million in revenue or more, but it usually only takes 2 more years to double that. And so why would we be selling and liquidating funds, let alone for the type of impact and the type of value creation we're after? It doesn't make sense to put this on a limited time frame.
That makes sense. And, having many venture fund operators on the, so many people are trying to break that model of like, well, we'll invest in 20 and, most of them will fall flat and we'll maybe get a unicorn out of it. And versus, no, these are all solid businesses with opportunity, smaller multiples, but more of them will do better, which again, comes back to regenerative. If 18 of them are falling off and 2 of them are succeeding, we didn't really meet our mandate, right?
Exactly.
Interesting. It seems like it makes a lot of sense, and I don't want to oversimplify. And someone, I try to always be on the outside looking in. It's hard to poke a lot of holes in it from over here. Not that I'm trying, but just like validating. But also, as I listen to it and hear it unpack, it seems like nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. To circle that one back to the.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and the interest from investors and institutions across Canada has been very high. And so one of our questions is. This is a pilot first fund. We've learned a lot. We're doing very well with what we've got here. And the question is, do we run a second cohort immediately after? Because we could do this year on year. There's enough market opportunity. There's definitively enough interest from potential searchers or CEOs and residents reaching out to us. And the question is, is there opportunity to do this provincially? Should we do this across the country? Because greater focus and greater geography and greater place-based effort can be a fabulous thing. So we'll worry about those things in the new year.
As I joke, those are success problems, Cordell.
Exactly.
Just so I understand correctly, that it's one cohort per fund, or would the second cohort also tap into that first fund, or does that facilitate a second fund?
One cohort for fund right now. I'll keep it.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
The devil is often in the details. Obviously, you've got some room. I think once this announces, you would have received a $5 million investment. But my quick math says you still have a little bit of space on your up to your 25. If somebody was interested in getting involved, or I'm assuming you're open to conversations.
Absolutely, feel free to reach out.
I'm a marketer at heart, so I got to give a little bit of a pitch in here somewhere.
Thank you, Tyler. Very much appreciated. And of course, they can reach out to us through our website at www.regenerativecapitalgroup.com.
And in terms of also, I imagine a lot of my audience is going to be really curious about, do they see themselves in this? Is this people just out of business school? Is it different ages? Have they, done a career and maybe exited and looking to get into something? Like who would be that kind of candidate from a cohort perspective, for thinking about cohort 2 for sure?
Yeah, thank you. We are receiving quite a bit of outreach week on week of individuals saying, when's the next cohort? When's the next cohort? Which is great. Although the search fund, the traditional search fund model was based on MBA graduates, 29 to 31-year-olds coming out of these Ivy League business schools. Our MBA programs look different than that in Canada, and it's a different demography, so that's not who we're after. Our youngest CEO in residence in this cohort was 32 up to 45. Again, these folks, they have leadership experience, they have P&L experience, they've demonstrated entrepreneurial spirit, they've demonstrated intrapreneurial spirit and growth. Again, they're ready to take on the hard work of being a CEO. So we don't care where they come from. We have someone who just immigrated to Canada as they received notification of this role. These are all fantastic people from all varied backgrounds. We'll find the right fit.
You are practicing what you preach. That's what I'm sensing for sure. Cordell, so interesting, so curious. I've been looking forward to this call for a few weeks as we've been playing phone tag a little bit as the world is, but really love what you guys are doing and really excited to see where this is going to go. I guess maybe last question, as I attempt to wind this down. When you're looking across Canada, talk to me a little bit about what you see in the different regions in terms of the silver tsunami. Is it pretty universal in terms of what might be happening in the Maritimes versus what's happening in Western Canada, or are you seeing any kind of differentials in different parts of our own big, massive country that we live in?
Yeah, it's pretty universal in the age demographics of the baby boomers retiring now. I would say that, the Maritimes have their own challenges just in an evolving economy that's out there. We have some of that out here on the West Coast. I would say that, what I've seen in Quebec, they actually have the most institutional infrastructure and an enabling environment to support this form of entrepreneurship through acquisition journey, which is interesting. More of a social economy there as well. And then, the heart of search in Canada is in Ontario and Toronto, where a lot of Bay Street folks, have caught wind of this over the last couple of years and see it as somewhere that they can have leadership, ownership, impact, equity. And then it's been quickly growing out west, Alberta and BC, the most so. So I think you're going to see a real surge in awareness in this as a very interesting career path, and again, a really interesting opportunity for stewardship.
I could imagine. Well, you got Alberta, Western Canada. We've kind of got that entrepreneur fire. Ontario, you've got the just sheer the population density, and you've got a level of sophistication financially. Like you can kind of unpack the reasons behind, which is just my own armchair kind of views of it. But you're right; it's excitement, it's opportunity, and it's maybe an unthought about venue. And we all get our avenue. We all get kind of excited about the hope and possibility go a long way, right? In terms of creating motivation.
Well, for those of your listeners that are in Calgary, one of the folks that we spoke with was the past dean of the business school there, Jim DeWalt, and him and one of their faculty, Phil Davidson, have launched their first entrepreneurship through acquisition search fund courses.
Excellent.
I am continuously impressed by, as you said, how entrepreneurial Calgary is. It's bananas. I love it. They've got
I fell in love with it. I moved here 20 years ago. And I was like, what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
This is a whole different. I grew up in Quebec, which is they're both great, but very, very different attitudes in general, especially if you can provide value in Alberta, you can start a business. Like, it is amazing the opportunity that exists here. And I'm very thankful I stayed. I was like, okay, I went to drink this Kool-Aid for a while and I never left.
Yeah. So I think you'll see it much bigger part of conversations going forward.
Well, I've really appreciated the perspective you shared today. One, the passion, and just clearly how versed and how engaged you are in this. And again, I know Iggy, I know of Mike, and now I know you. I see nothing but success for you guys in the future. So really glad. Thanks for taking the time to come on and just sharing the story, and one, educating me and hopefully educating my audience on what you guys are building. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Really appreciate being here.
Amazing. Have yourself a good one.
You too. Take care.